Paulo here, welcome to the channel where I make how-to videos from subjects like Mac tips, backends, salesforce, and game development. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I'm starting out this Unreal Engine blueprints how-to where I'm breaking down the subject into smaller digestible chunks, and I'll be releasing every Tuesday and Thursday. So stay tuned for that. So in this first video, I'm gonna give a little bit of overview on how blueprints work. So let's get started. So first off, open up Epic Games Launcher, launcher editor. Right now I'm using 5.2.0, might be different by the time you end on this video, but it should be the same. So the template I'm going to use is the third person template. Make sure you have blueprint selected and the start content, and then create your project and hit create. So I already have that created, so I won't do that anymore. I have the project open here on my other window. Cool. So this is how the third person template looks like. When everything I see here on the game currently is through actors added on the editor. So when I hit the play here, when I start the game, this one that are in yellow at runtime gets inserted in the game. So one in particular is the BP third person character, which is this person, the humanoid. And with it, you can see that I could use the camera to look around. I could use the WSD keyboard to move the character, and I could use the spacebar to jump. So let's look at how that was done. So let me escape this. If I open up the content browser and look under the third person folder, first let's look at the input. So in the input, there's an action folder which has a binding for the jump, look, and move. And if I go one folder up, there's the IMC default, which maps the particular keys, and then this one is just setting it up as an action, so we could use it later in the blueprint, which I'll show you next. So under the blueprint section here, we have that third person character that we were playing with when we were running the game. So let's open this up. Immediately you'll be greeted by this graph. So I'm just gonna zoom out and give you a quick overview of what this is. So this is the node type based way of coding. As you can see, there was some inputs mapping already done for us using by the template. So on event begin play, it's casting that player controller. There's just a different class, and then checking if it's valid, and then it's gonna have that mapping context, which is the file we were looking at, the IMC file. And then by doing that, it allows it to bind to the different actions for the moving the camera using this node. I'll explain those nodes later. Moving input, which allows the keyboard movement, and the jump, which allows the characters to jump. So basically this is what is in this event graph out of the box from the third person character. One thing to note here is the type of blueprint that we're editing. So right now it's just the says here blueprint at the bottom right, and at the top right you would see the parent class is a character. So those will be useful later once we start diving deeper on the different kinds of blueprint that we could create. So up here we have the event graph, we have the viewport, and the construction script. First, let me jump in the viewport, which is kind of very familiar. So this is similar to the editor where you have the actors in the game. So by the difference here is we're dealing with components, not by actors. So at this section here, we have components. So these are the different components that you would add on the viewport here. You could control the viewport here, similar as you would do in the game editor. You could move in and out, use the controls here to move, rotate, and scale the character. On the section here for the components, you would see once I click here, the details section here changes. So each one of these details you could access through blueprint later and change any of these variables. And there's also this character movement, which is special for this particular parent class and only appears on this class. And this section is the blueprint. So this is basically the code that we were looking at, the event graph, which build this up. So if I double click on event begin play, it would zoom me into that event begin play. The other tab that we have here is the construction script. So at the moment there's nothing here, so basically anything you add here will appear in the editor and would appear before the game starts, not when you start the game, and not before you start the game. So anything you add there would be in the game, and then you could edit some of these properties. So that's the construction script. It's very different from the functions, which we'll talk about later. Cool. So that's a bit of overview on that third person character. Next is I'll cover the variables on a different blueprint. So I'm back to my third person map. Under this button here, there's a drop down arrow. Click on the open level blueprint. So what I have here is something I prepared ahead. So you can see that this doesn't have a parent class on the top right, and it says clearly at the bottom it's a level blueprint. So this level blueprint is specific to this level only. So here I added some common nodes or that you would see or you would encounter. So we have here the ones in red are mostly event nodes. So actions that happen during the game would trigger this, and it has execution pins and also has different output pins. So the ones here that I'm highlighting is expecting an actor object, and we'll talk about those in later when we get to the variables. So moving along, different nodes that you might see are the pure functions. This one's in green. There's no execution pins like this white pins here, but it allows you to get specific actor data or reference to it, and then use it later for your script. It also has some manipulation and all of that, like the slurp and select. The other common one you would see are the impure functions. Here you would see there's input for execution, this white pins. There's also an input for this one's expecting an actor class, and there's also an output. This one's outputting an actor object reference. So those will be valuable later when we go to the setting up the variables. Cool. For example, display 2D sound. Input is a sound. You could plug in a sound here, or you could select a sound from this arrow here, and when the node passes here, it's going to execute and play whatever's in there, whatever sound you specify there. And then we also have control flows for different logic in your game. You have to loop through an array of items, or it could also have some branch nodes depending on the condition, execute a different logic. You also have macros, which we'll talk about later, which is different from functions. And then we have the variables. So the variables allows you to store basically any data of any data type. So here is that section for variables. So what I have here is just a collection of one variable for boolean, which would hold a true or false value, a byte, an integer. What I have here is very specific. It's an array of integer. We have float, we have transform. Basically, if I click on that plus arrow, I could select very specific arrays type of data type here. I could select the BP character third person that we were looking at earlier and create a reference for that person. And then if I click here, I could say BP ref. And I could drag and drop that into the node here. It would allow you to either get or set. So here I'm just going to do a get and get a reference to that BP third person character. Cool. So that is variables, and there's also a different kind of node that you would commonly see is a timeline, which allows you to animate using keyframes. I could double click on here and then go in and add some animation to any actors or components in the screen. we'll cover that in a future video. But anyway, that's to keep it short. This is the quick overview of how blueprints work and how to differentiate the different kinds of nodes you would encounter with it. Cool. So hope you like this video. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Watch out for the next video. I'll be talking about events and how we could use it to interact with actors in the game. Cool. Cheers. Bye for now.